Welcome everybody to That's the Ticket. And wow, what an exciting weekend we had. The Hulk Hogan wrestling WrestleMania boots, the ones that he wore in the ring against Mr. T in that main event, sold for a whopping $1,037,000. So that's why we're here to talk about WrestleMania and talk about that incredible sale. My name is Paul Anand from Wrestling Card Price Guide. I'm here with Ben Woooo, and of course we're going to talk about Hulk Hogan and we're going to talk about a massive Hogan collection. Can't have anybody else but the one and only David Peck. So let's get right into it. Since that's the ticket, Ben, why don't you we start? I'm going to put up the tickets and everyone can look at the different ticket stubs we have and why we're. It's no small secret why we're talking about a WrestleMania when we do this show about the greatest nights in wrestling. You could have all the WrestleManias, but this was the first one, the granddaddy of them all. So off you go, Ben. Tell us about this ticket.
Yeah, I mean, historically, obviously, WrestleMania one is huge in wrestle lore. Lots of collectors would want it in general because of that, but there's also a line of collectors that want to collect all the WrestleMania tickets or all the WrestleMania tickets with Hogan. So you have all these branch outs of collectors for this ticket, and of course, everyone needs WrestleMania one. So you got stubs, you have fulls, you have proofs. There's something for everyone. I think there's 27 or so stubs. So not a huge population considering the demand. A handful of proofs and a handful or less of fulls. So, you're looking at a population of well under 50 for, maybe the most popular or known event in wrestling. So
Now, would
pretty
this
rare
would this be one of
and
the
pretty
most
valuable.
one of the most important ticket stubs, do you think? Because it's the original WrestleMania. I mean, everything goes back to that, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, it is. It's got to be on the list. I mean, I guess if you'd put on most people's Rushmore just because everyone knows it, right? Everyone knows WrestleMania. It's kind of like everyone knows the Mickey Mantle card or the Jordan Fleer card. And in wrestling, if you talk to Grandma Barbara, whatever, and you say, "Oh yeah, wrestle," everyone's gonna know WrestleMania.
Of
So,
course.
so it's got to be there.
Yeah, I mean,
Whether it's
for the format of this show, we could do every show on a different WrestleMania, obviously.
sure, sure,
But we certainly cannot skip the first one because that was the beginning, that was the genesis of where everything came from. And just to give you an idea of how big a show and how popular and how much of a pop culture thing it is, as I mentioned at the outset, Hogan's boots sold this weekend for $1,037,000. David Peck, $1 million plus. What do you figure?
Well, I think it's awesome. I can honestly say it was the most exciting auction I've ever witnessed. Unfortunately, I tapped out a couple minutes into extended bidding. It was at seven. The bid was at I think, or the price was 747,000, I believe. And I tell you, I just think that. The trading card world is a little bit different than, or a lot different in many ways than ring worn or game worn if you're in pro sports. And the beauty of this item is there's really no immediate substitute for it. It's not like the challenge with trading cards. Let's take a 85 tops Hogan. There's a lot of them, and it really just gets differentiated between mine's an 8, yours is a 9 or 10, etc. But when you start talking about an item like this, you either win it or you don't. And I really think that you know, I guess there's a little bit of controversy that's emerged in the last 24 hours as far as I saw Darren Ravel had shown a video with Hulk indicating that he'd wore him against Andre. But I really think there's something to this photo match concept because when you looked at the photo and you looked at the toe of the boot, I really feel like that carries a lot of weight in my view. Hogan's not known for necessarily having everything remembered perfectly. And, I think an outsider like me that's not an expert on wrestling boots, it would seem, like he maybe wear the same pair for some time. So, the issue with maybe the blood on them not being there from WrestleMania itself, once again, he may have worn those into the future. And then when he stopped wearing them, there was a blood stain. But I think it's fantastic news for the wrestling hobby. People got to understand. I mean, $1 million, these numbers get thrown around all the time now when you see a Logan Paul Pokemon for 16.5 million. But let's not lose sight of the fact of how much money that really is. And we knew it was probably going to be a Hulk Hogan item at some point. And I think the real takeaway is this just raises the bar for Apex items in the wrestling memorabilia space. We've had some banter on Twitter with Conrad. He owns the big gold belt. I've got to think he's smiling from ear to ear. This has to catapult the value of that, in my view. Ben, who obviously has, a Ric Flair robe, a Randy Savage robe, and quite a number of other items. I think it's got to do wonders for the values of those, because if now I'm looking at a Hogan at 1,037,000, that 100 all of a sudden, well, 150, 200, it helps raise the stakes of what people think something can be worth and should be worth. So wonderful news and exciting, I think, for everybody involved.
Now, a few years ago, these things were worth 66 grand. Now we get up to 1 million. And there was some talk about the way this auction went down. Originally, when it was sold as boots that Hogan wore in a poster. And then I think through the photo matching process, they determined, wait a minute, this might be from WrestleMania 1. And it was specifically when I saw the Ravel video, which was fantastic, by the way, that crease in the boot was the telltale sign. That bend in the boot by the toe. It's like, yeah, that's the same boot. And now you've got the pedigree of WrestleMania 1 and you've got $1 million item. Ben, you're one of the biggest collectors in the wrestling world. Tell us about what you think about that number.
Yeah, I mean, I did my own research, because I was planning on bidding on this. I actually bid on it when it was 66 grand. I saw him at the National that year, and there was another Macho Man robe, the silver and black one that I had my eye on. That's kind of when I started getting into wanting to buy and ring worn wrestling. I'm like, gosh, this is cool stuff. And I just didn't know enough about the price points at that time. So I didn't go hard. Man, I wish I would have been harder on those boots at
Yeah,
66.
sure.
But, it makes you wonder who bought those boots and did they do their own photo matching at that time? I feel like if I was 2 years prior to this, I would have been able to do that. And, uh, you wonder when this was matched, right? Was it matched prior to giving it to the new company and just kind of spoon fed them and say, hey, look at what I found here. I think they're the boots. So I think Rovell, he's right. It's all about the story, and the bigger the event, obviously, the more it's going to go for. I mean, WrestleMania 1, as we say, it doesn't get any bigger. Maybe WrestleMania 3, but that toe, I came to the same conclusion when I was doing my research. You always look for, when I'm photo matching something, I always look for, okay, look for something that there's no way it can be it, right? Everyone wants to see what they don't want to see. So what I do is I look for how there's no way it can be this because of this, right? I didn't really I saw a couple things on that boot that didn't match, but they were scuffs. They're things that could have been rubbed out. They could have been painted over, which happened quite a bit. But that toe, that crease in the toe is undeniable. Now, could that happen? It was kind of right between the big toe and maybe the second toe. Could there be something similar? But that crease in that toe, coupled with some other things that they pointed out, and then a scuff in the inside of the sole that I matched from another photo that wasn't included. I mean, I'm pretty confident that these are the boots. And that's why I bid, but I wasn't going to a million. But I think that wrestling, compared to other sports that have already kind of done the photo matching and already kind of been established as ring worn or game worn, as David mentioned, baseball, basketball, they've already established themselves as this, and that people have already done a lot of the research, and a lot of these players knew that this stuff was going to be worth stuff sooner, so they kept them.
Right.
Hogan and these wrestling guys, I mean, dude, he didn't know. It's not that he didn't care, but I guess he just didn't care because they weren't worth a lot. I mean, he never thought twice about it. We see this video that Darren put together in the blood, and Hogan said there was this, and I think it's exactly how David mentioned. I think that he remembers the blood on the boot from a different match.
Yeah.
and that's how he recognized him. And he wasn't thinking WrestleMania 1 or 2 or whatever. It was what he remembered on these boots when he looked at them. Oh my gosh, I remember that match. I had blood all over those things, and that's it. I think it happened later. And
Well, and let me just piggyback on that for a second. The other thing is Hogan likes to kind of embellish, I think, at times. And so, admittedly, like saying it was versus Andre in Madison Square
sure,
Garden, I
yeah,
could see him like, hey, the people are going to eat this up, you
Right.
know?
Andre.
Um, the one other point I'd like to make, and I think that this is something that we've all struggled with. Years ago, people would say, well, these guys that collect all these wrestling cards, they're gatekeepers. They won't let people into the hobby because they've bought so many of them. And that's definitely something that premise on some level has held back wrestling cards because if you have a high concentration of cards and a handful of collections and those people aren't sellers, they don't come to market, right? And so this situation, it's really quite fascinating that they came to market, just a couple years later. You kind of have to wonder what the expectation of the seller was and heritage. People, when they see the estimates, I learned this, I'm not very familiar with selling through an auction house. I only did it last year. The estimate has really nothing to do with the expectation of the final value. What they do is they set the estimate. The initial bid is 25% of that estimate. So this would have had an opening bid, let's say, of $50,000. And a lot of times, what they're hoping happens is they have a low enough opening bid that you get a number of bidders, and then hopefully you get that sort of bidding war as people get attached to it and maybe want to win. And but for to have a public sale like this, to have something turn over at such a huge appreciation rate, I think it's fantastic, and I think it's going to help the category because the hardest part, we're always reading and hearing about comps, everything's comps these days. And I think humans, they like to have some confidence that what they're paying is sort of reasonable, right? And if all of a sudden you have a pair of boots garner $1,037,000, it's going to be a lot easier to pay 200,000 for a Ric Flair robe, or Randy Savage, whatever the number may be. I also think what'll be interesting is hopefully this pushes maybe some other high profile items into the market, and we can see what those garner because wrestling has been very strong. I mean, you've had some, clearly certain cards have dipped, but I think the genre as a whole, I mean, look at the PSA grading statistics. I posted something maybe 2 weeks ago that really caught my eye. In a 30-day period, PSA had graded over 9,000 cards in the boxing and wrestling category. I mean, that's insane amount of product that's coming to market and in many cases being absorbed. So exciting situation, I think, for Heritage. I'm sure they're thrilled. The seller and obviously the buyer, you've got to have some seriously deep pockets to bid that much. So I'm sure they're thrilled and can't wait to get them.
Well, you touched upon something there that I was going to get at. The question for both you guys, the Hulk Hogan yellow boots or the Ric Flair blue Starcade rope? One, which one do you think is ultimately going to have the higher value? And two, which one would you rather have? Ben, you go first. You're a robe guy.
yeah. I mean, I love Flair. Well, now if we're looking at just pure money, I think the Hogan boots are going to be worth the most, and this is why.
Yep.
Hogan's Hogan. Um, Flair, the Starcade robe is iconic for us as collectors. We love Flair, we love the NWA, we love the whole history of it. But right now, investors that cross over, I mean, it's not WWE, WWF, right? It's I think that's what makes the butterfly robe probably the most expensive and worth the most because it's WWE. I love the Starcade robe. I also know that it's in rough shape. Condition is a is
Factor.
a thing. But the other thing with Hogan is there's not too many things that you can photo match with Hogan, right? There's not too many things in general. Now, this is an Apex item. I'll use Apex term. It's an Apex item in general, but with Hogan particularly, it's hard to photo match any of his stuff. It's basically boots. You know, you can unless there's something very definitive on his trunks or shirts or the rip. But again, it's all levels of what do you believe when you're photo matching, because some things can be made, right? Some things can be ripped, or so you can put a mark on something.
Yeah, sure.
Boots are pretty lock solid. So I think number one, Hogan's are going to be worth more. Um, so I guess as an investor, I'd probably want that. And I love Hogan, even though I love Flair and I love the robes. I think that it's a more expensive item, and ultimately down the road going to be worth more every step of the way. That's my opinion.
What do you say on that, David?
Well, this is sort of an interesting category from the standpoint, like, so Conrad, who has the big gold belt, he's fairly active on Twitter, and he's chimed in on some of these topics over time. And I had recently, somebody's like, "What are some big items?" Like, I think Andre's brown robe, or like vest, I guess you could call it. That's got to be something that would garner a lot of money. These Hogan boots, I mean, that's sort of a given, right? That makes total sense. And I've always thought the blue Flair robe, um, the historical significance to me is just unimaginable. Like, there was a collector, he's since passed away, the owner of the Colts, who had this sort of iconic American collection of just so many different types of things. Like, that's the type of item I could see maybe somebody like that buying, and now you're up against a wall of money, and it's going to sell for whatever he wants it to sell for. He's going to be the winner, right? um but Conrad raised the point that because that robe is NWA and was not seen on WWF TV, he think it hurts the value.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't have necessarily known that. I wouldn't have necessarily come to that conclusion, but I would yield to Ben and his expertise in that category, because it's not a category I'm participating in. And I think there's some rationale. And if astute collectors feel that way, then I'm, like I said, I'm going to yield to that. Personally, I like the Flair robe better. It has, I mean, when you look at like his 1982 Wrestling All Stars card, he's wearing it. I think it's, I have a lot of affinity for the late 70s, early 80s wrestling, just because it's gritty, and it's before the glitz and glamour, and kayfabe was in full gear. But I think that we've seen it time and time again in the cards that Ric Flair just doesn't garner quite the same value as Hulk Hogan. I think Flair is spectacular. I can sit and watch, honestly, more Flair on YouTube than probably Hogan. I like watching a lot of promos, and Flair is the master. But Hulk Hogan is Hulk Hogan. He's the Michael Jordan of wrestling. He's got the most crossover appeal. He's now obviously since passed away. So, like the signature, for example, on those boots, he's not signing anything more. It's a finite situation. And so I think from an investment standpoint, Hogan has just sort of proven to be a better investment. But I think more in the case of a rising tide lifts all boats. And like that Flair robe, I don't know what an accurate estimate is, but I think it's got to easily be $250,000 or higher. WWE on their show, when they were trying to buy it from the guy, they wanted to offer him, I think it was 60,000. He paid like 10,000. If somebody said it would sell for 500,000, I could buy that. It wouldn't be shocked at all.
I could buy that
But of the
now.
two, yeah, I mean, I
Now,
wouldn't
after a
surprise me
mill
at
on the
all.
boots, it's like, yeah, now $60,000 is a giveaway. You know what I mean?
Oh well, I would pay. Listen, I'd
Yeah,
pay 60,000.
yeah, me too.
And
I
I'm not
pay
even
twice that now.
interested. Yeah, I mean, I feel like I was getting it for free. So, long answer, but I think that the cool factor. I like the Flair better. I think investment and just how amazing to say to somebody, these are Hulk Hogan's boots from WrestleMania. Like that's got some sizzle,
Yeah,
right? And
exactly.
sizzle is what adds to price.
Well, let's talk about WrestleMania. That first card. Vince bet the farm on that night. Had that night not have worked out the way it did, we might not be sitting here, the three of us right now. But that's really, during the expansion period, it all led to WrestleMania. WrestleMania was a huge success, and then one, two, and three just went really huge. I'm just going to quickly, just as I've done on some of the other shows, go through the matches on the card, and then I'll get your thoughts on what your favorite bits of the night were, and then we'll call it a day. In the opening match, I've always enjoyed this one: Tito Santana versus the Executioner. You know who the Executioner was, David?
Isn't that Matt Bourne?
No, no, you're getting that confused with Ricky Dragon. Playboy Buddy Rose.
Oh, that's right. That's
That's
right. That's
right.
right.
You
That's
remember the
right. Yeah,
flabby
No,
guy?
Matt Bourne's on the card. Sorry,
That's
sorry.
that's
Yeah,
right.
yeah, yeah. I
Yeah,
love
that,
Buddy Rose. I think Buddy Rose is amazing when you watch some of those old AWA promos, and he could actually wrestle. People don't
sure.
realize it. Those heavyset guys back in the day were very well trained. He's one of them.
Right.
Well, and he just got fatter and fatter and
Yeah.
fatter. I mean,
Got really
at
big
the
because when he
end,
was younger, he
I
was
mean,
he
he
was
looked like a. I mean, it wasn't good.
Yeah.
he
It's like, how is
did.
this guy even out there? But earlier, he wasn't that
No,
bad. I mean,
no.
it's that end game, man. They would oof that.
So
Buddy
He
obviously,
was.
Rose. It's all I see is Buddy and then a Rose. The name, like, oh, I don't know about
so
this guy,
so
man.
so Tito opened up the card. Obviously, he beat the Executioner. That got things rolling. But then the second card is interesting. The San Martinos, David and Bruno against Brutus Beefcake and Luscious Johnny Valiant. Um, it never happened for David Sammartino, did it? I think Bruno tried everything he could to get his boy in there, and just David just didn't measure up, or I don't want to say he didn't measure up, but he just wasn't his old man. And this was before Beefcake started teaming up with Greg Valentine. He did Luscious V was actually in the match, but third match was Matt Bourne. And of course, if you don't remember Matt Bourne, you'll remember Doink the Clown, and that's ultimately who Matt Bourne became. And he lost to Ricky the Dragon. Fourth match was King Kong Bundy defeating Special Delivery Jones, SC Jones, and that was the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You remember you had to get the five count. Um, then of course the Body Slam challenge, Andre the Giant against Big John Studd. And if you recall, at the end of it, he was throwing the money out of the duffel bag into the crowd, and then Heenan came in on the ropes. Then we had an IC championship where the Junkyard Dog defeated Greg the Hammer Valentine, but he didn't take the title because it was a count out. So Valentine was able to keep the belt. And then we talked about this last time, Ben. I think that he shortly lost the belt to Tito Santana. Um, then we had the World Tag Team Championships changing hands. The Iron Sheik and Nikolai Volkov beat Mike Rotundo and Barry Windham. What were they called? The American Express at that time?
U.S. Express.
U.S. Express. That's right. And then the second
Not the
class.
Canadian Express, not the Canadian Express, Paul. The U.S.
No.
Express.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
That's,
Yeah, the U.S. Express. There was a Can-Am connection back in the day, though. Um, and then the women's championship match. And this was the one with Cyndi Lauper. And of course, Cyndi Lauper got involved in the programming leading up to WrestleMania with Captain Lou. And the Rock and Wrestling connection was a big part of the reason why wrestling took hold because of that Cyndi Lauper connection. So she was in the corner of Wendy Richter as Wendy Richter defeated Leilani Kai, who had Moolah in her corner. And she became the new champion. And she was like uber popular. And this is 1985. Women's wrestling was basically the Fabulous Moolah, and that's it. you know. Um,
Yeah.
and then, of course, the main event and the last match, Hulk Hogan with Mr. T, who was for you people that don't remember Mr. T from the 80s. He was in a show called The A-Team, very very popular, and he went against Roddy Piper, who at that point had become sort of the number one heel in the business, with Paul Orndorff in his corner, and Randy's dad, Bob Orton. I think Jimmy Snuka was floating around there as well. But what made WrestleMania so big, despite the matches, was just the star power. Liberace, the Yankees manager, the Where's the Beef Girl? There was all sorts of stuff. So before we sign off, why don't you tell me
Ali,
Ali?
Ali,
Yeah,
right?
obviously Muhammad Ali. That's right.
Uh,
And there's a story, I don't know if it's true or not, but Ali was supposed to referee the main event, but it was determined he couldn't. So Pat, sort of last minute, Pat Patterson refereed the main event, but Ali got right into it at the end, and he wasn't as bad as he got, but he was already starting to slow down. You could see that his Parkinson's was at an early stage there, but it was just magnificent. There was never ever a wrestling card like this, and Vince, like I say, he bet the farm on it, and we're here today because of that all worked out. David, tell me about some of your favorite moments of the night before we call it a day.
I just love the spectacle, the videos from backstage when they go through the curtain there and you just see the crowd go bananas. I mean, the Madison Square Garden, the way they had that arena set up with seats so close and there's just basically the apron around it. It really creates like that, for lack of a better term, big fight feel, right? And um, I am, I'm born in 79. And so I started watching wrestling in diapers, but, around 84, 85 is when I started to conceptualize it. And Hulk Hogan, he was on NBC, you could see the WWF was starting to come up. And, we talk about the second ago, the US Express, Barry Windham and Mike Rotundo were like the big stars from Florida. And the WWF just put on a better show. Like people want to say Vince stole the talent. Well, who wouldn't want to go work on that stage? I mean, if your business is professional wrestling and you look at that presentation versus, let's say even a Starcade, the WWF was just cooler. I think the other thing about the event is that there was a lot of wrestling fans there that maybe had gone to the prior garden shows, but Vince ushered in a whole new type of fan. Wrestling was no longer kind of dorky, but a hidden pleasure. People were like overtly wrestling fans, and there's a lot of celebrities, that you'll see it from time to time now that are like, oh, I was at the garden for it. So I can watch WrestleMania over and over again because when Piper comes out, the heat is just unbelievable. Hogan, the excitement is unbelievable, and it's just a fun card. So I think if it wasn't for the success of that, I don't think the three of us would be talking here today. And that's once again what makes those boots so special. It is the original WrestleMania.
Yeah, you ain't getting $1 million on those boots if WrestleMania wasn't the spectacle that you say it became. Ben, your thoughts on the night?
Yeah, I mean, heck, what else is there to say? I mean, have you ever seen another wrestling event ever since then? I mean, that went from zero to 100 with all the celebrity, Vince partnering up with MTV, bringing in Muhammad Ali, Cyndi Lauper. I mean, you had music, you had boxing, and then making a spectacle behind the curtain, as Peck said, doing the interviews, and then the lead. I mean, it was just, you had the professional aspect, like on the microphone to call the match as if it's not kayfabe, as if it's a real boxing match, and then you had all of the music and MTV crazy all in one deal. And I don't even know if there's ever been another WrestleMania with that many outside star power brought in with from different avenues converging. Has there been ever a new? I,
With that
I
many
don't. I,
celebrities, hard to say.
I don't think so. Really. I mean, from that many different directions to kind of bring in. I
Yeah,
can't think of one.
spectacle is the right
So
word. My thoughts on it is I've always been a big Gorilla Mark. I love Gorilla Monsoon, and I thought you started to hear the first time a movable object, and you started to hear about the pandemonium here, and him and Jesse were just such a great team together that they did a bunch of subsequent WrestleManias together, and for me it was just like this is great. Like I was already, I wasn't in high school, I wasn't in university yet, but I think it was in my last year of high school. I was in a rock and roll band playing around Michigan and wrestling all of a sudden. And I'd been a wrestling fan and a big Flair guy. I was getting all this press. I'm watching the news talk about this wrestling card, WrestleMania. And I remember it very distinctly. The Maple Leaf Gardens, they did the closed circuit TV, and it was the first time I'd ever gone into the Maple Leaf Gardens to watch something on a screen. Um, but it was just incredible. And the first few WrestleManias back then, that's how they were. We'd go into the hockey arena and we'd watch. 15,000 of us would watch a TV. Um, but it was something. Like I remember it. And you said, David, how many times we've seen it? I must have seen that show over 5 or 6 times since then. It's not my favorite WrestleMania of all of them, but it's certainly the one that that got the whole thing going. So yeah, we could talk forever, but let's wind this up. I just get your final thoughts on the boot sale, just because that's such a massive sort of thing in our world, and then we'll call it a day. David.
Let's just hopefully see, some additional sales. I think it's gonna once people question why I sold my sets last year publicly, right? And because there's a lot I have to pay, obviously
Sure.
taxes. I had to pay the VIG, the heritage, but I wanted there to be a high ticket sale of these wrestling cards because I think it further strengthens the hobby, right?
I'd like to.
And this right here, I mean, it got shared all over social media. It sounds like Ben had referenced that a true, well, I hate the word true collector, a collector, because Kevin O'Leary might be annoying showing off the card, but we can't say he's not a collector. These landed in somebody's home that really wanted them, and I think that's really exciting and just great news for wrestling collectibles in general.
Awesome. Any final words, Ben?
Yeah, I mean, nothing really more. It's going to be very interesting to see what else comes out. That's going to set the medium side, and ultimately, these boots will sell. It's kind of like the Wagner card. If these come back up for sale, they're not selling for less. They're going to keep on going up and up and up. This is the mark, and then below it, we'll see how it all fills in. I think it's going to bring up those apex items, like Peck said. The momentum's going. And it's gonna be really fun to watch. And I am also happy that again I'm not able to say who bought them, but they are in a collector's hands, which is pretty cool that collectors are still supreme right now.
And you, my
We'll see
friend,
what happens in the future. But
my friend, being one of the primo collectors
oh well,
in the
this was a
hobby.
different level. So
Yeah,
I'm
but
I'm
still, it's
priced out now.
nothing
So
wrong for this stuff sitting in your locker there, you know.
yeah,
Oh, good. Well, thanks very much, guys. This is great. Again, wonderful. Like 2 weeks ago, we had the Logan Paul thing, 16 million, and now we have this. And Tony and I are always talking about the next five-figure, $10,000 wrestling card. We had an Andre Amakatsu. We've had a couple of Hogans hit 20. And it's just going up, 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 up. And everyone's saying, "Oh, maybe this market is going to collapse," but I don't think so. I think that people are catching on to that. You know what? Wrestling needs to be treated a little more seriously. People have no problem paying millions of dollars for baseball, hockey, football. So it's about time. It's about time that wrestling, as big as it is, as popular as it is now, is getting sort of the attention and the love and the juice that it's getting. So, anyways, thank you very much, guys, for watching. Thank you too for being with us. That's the ticket with Ben and I. We'll be back at it with our next episode soon. Thank you, David, for coming and joining us. Thank you, everyone, for watching, and we'll see you soon.
it was fun. Thanks, Paul. Thanks, David.
Thank you, guys.